So we're going to check a lighting circumstance here, and then we're ready to go.
Nobody.
Maybe. Oh, there's a door. There's movement.
Yeah, they're coming down to use that.
Right here.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Take it away. History in the making.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick introduction of who we are. Paul has already left us. Three of us are from the Des Plaines Public Library. My name's Giese, Joanne Griffin, and John guy over there, John Lavalie. Joanne and I are in adult services, and John is in technical services. He's also our metadata specialist over at the library. And then Paul Foxworth is from the Niles Public Library District. He works in youth services part-time, and we share a patron base, and our cities share borders and so forth. Before I turn it over to Paul, I just want to say that there's an inside joke in my family that whatever question you ask my father, whether it's where are my socks or why is there a two-party system in this country, he always starts with something like, well, you have to go back to the Civil War. So really, our story, and how our team was in someone, you have to go back to Karen McBride, who 9 months ago worked at the Des Plaines Public Library. It's a web services librarian, and one day sent an email out that said, hey, I did this thing and it was cool, and you guys think maybe? And we were like, yeah, we don't know what it is, whatever, sure, we'll do it. And she found Paul, and she got us together, and so we're here. So without further ado, I'm going to do just Paul is going to do one part, and then I'm going to do the other part, because our project kind of has split in two, and then is going to converge at some point in the future in three-point perspective. Okay?
Now, some of you younger people might be disadvantaged by this question, but let's give this a go. Who can tell me what these are? Come on, shout it out. But yes, but more specifically, what it is.
Loose leaf notebooks, a book.
No, 8-tracks.
8-tracks. My first computer. Cassette player.
Mr. Cassette player.
Old CDs.
And
Eraser.
now, what do these have in common? No. You say outdated technology, but flip that. Each one of these was in its day the state-of-the-art technology. And we all use them in successive stages. And at my particular library, these are some of the people who over the years used this to make our library what it is today. Thanks. I'm going to talk very briefly about our ILEAD project. Basically, Des Plaines and Niles had a common goal, which was to turn paper prints into digital history. Now, after a surprise media presentation, I'll explain the mechanics of that. TIFF files, content DM, why we owe our life to Alice Scott. Thank you for that equipment grant, ISL, etc., etc. But first, I just want to say that the theme of my presentation is that in making ready images that we could upload to the Illinois Digital Archive, which was my mandate to get Niles a footprint on the Illinois Digital Archive. Once you stir that ILEAD pot, all kinds of things come out of it, and there's going to be at least 3 other derivatives of that I'm going to talk about later. So once you start an ILEAD project, you might wind up with a handful of projects. Okay, thank you.
It just starts, right?
Right.
Okay.
What is the relationship between a library and its community? The library helps the community grow. To do so, the library has been busy changing for nearly 50 years. Many of the services we now provide and the technologies that support them simply did not exist back then. Things change, but there is continuity. Everyone learns something they need to know. People learn to do new things or find something that is deeply meaningful to them. Some changes are startling. There was a time, for example, when ladies might wear white gloves to the library. The 60s was a more formal time. December 1967, for example, found male patrons wearing suits and ties to the Christmas party. As the 1960s became the 1970s, patrons and we staff persons looked different yet again. But children still needed story time and the chance to dance. And everyone needed access to books, music, and much more. Through the decades, we've tried to be a place where everyone felt included. Interior space has constantly changed, just like the patrons and the resources they've used. Time was when we used space much differently and relied on card catalogs to locate collection holdings. Then came computers. Instead of card catalogs, we just needed terminals the size of dorm room refrigerators. Time was when we had a bookmobile, and then an even better bookmobile. Because we grew, we had to expand. We did in 1983, and again in 1997. Along the way, we had to sacrifice some things, such as our sunken courtyard, and the original Veterans Walkway. Although we were careful to keep and reposition benches honoring sacrifices made in America's wars. Change never stops. Once again, we are bringing in the architects to reconfigure our space. We build it, and the patrons come. That sums up nearly 50 years of history. In addition to its staff, the library has always depended on its volunteers and its board of directors to meet the challenges that lay ahead and to make Niles proud. So, what has changed? Well, in terms of trying to give patrons what they want, nothing has changed. But in terms of who we are, what we can provide, and our physical surroundings, it has been constant change. It is what we do.
On some level, I think the reason many of us are librarians is because we like stories. That's what those things on our shelves are full of. Well, barring the nonfiction, that is. But what we wanted to do was to tell the community its own history. We wanted to share the community's history with the community. The idea was that the library is a de facto custodian of that history to some extent. Niles has a historical society, by the way, and we do partner with them. But in a sense, we also are custodians of that. We wanted to share it with the community. As far as the mechanics of how this project worked, I guess I should say this is one of those derivatives I talked about, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. As far as the mechanics of getting our images on IDA, you heard part of that described to the group before us. First you get content TM, and you worry about whether you're ever going to master it, and then you call Alice for help, and you get the hang of it. Then you make the TIFFs, then you make the JPEGs, which is to say we scan hundreds of TIFFs, which we actually use to populate a shared drive at the library. And then from those, we winnowed down the images that we thought had the most archival value and turned them into 150 dpi JPEGs. And then we submit to ISL, and we index them, and they get published, and then they're there. And if you're interested, there are on this table here sheets like this, which will show you what our landing page looks like on IDA, and then some of what you see once you navigate into it. The slideshow is a derivative because once I was knee-deep in images, I thought, well, we ought to use this for something. There's a story here, let's tell a story. This is the story of how our library grew and changed. It's very timely because we're bringing in the architects for the third time in 50 years, so this is the right time to tell that story. You know, I can imagine this being shown to our board, I can imagine it being shown to patrons, I can imagine it being put on closed circuit TV, and I can certainly imagine it being linked to the website. Marketing, marketing, marketing. And the other derivative was those crowdsourced, those images that went onto the shared drive of the library ignited a mini crowdsourcing frenzy as people were emailing me saying, I remember that guy second from the left. He was here for 1,000 years, and he worked in tech, and he this and he that, and they started filling in holes as to who this cast of characters was. Where I want to go next with this is I want to expand our presence on the Illinois Digital Archive for sure. There's a lot more great pictures. But what I also want to do with the equipment, which we were graciously able to acquire, thank you. I want to partner next. I don't have a mandate yet, but what I'm going to propose is that we partner with our reference department to take their ongoing interviews with veterans, which is called the Veterans Project, and convert and begin transitioning that into video. We now have audio streaming and transcripts of the audio and some still images online. Why on earth isn't that all combined in video? And then we can do the cutaways to the veteran's hand on his cane, or the shot of the metal he brought back from the war, or the snapshot he took in Pearl Harbor when his ship docked. We can basically make it much more concise, much more compelling, much more time efficient, and we can use a lot of very cool Ken Burns techniques doing it. So that's the next frontier, and that's why I argued for video equipment at our library. Well, that's my piece of the project, and Stephen is going to fill you in on Des Plaines project. Thank you.
Keep my water handy. Because after about 3 minutes, I sound like Bill Clinton, which always gets a laugh, and I don't know why. But every class I teach, I say that, and everybody goes, oh. And then someone said to me once, it's an oral sex joke is implied. I didn't say that. They said that to me. We're videotaping this. You didn't say banana.
Right.
There's a safe word for me. They say banana if I'm going in bed.
Sorry. Good.
So I'm doing our part of the presentation, which is stupid because I don't believe in preparing for anything. But what I want to talk about, we do have a product to show you. We did come up with something, but it's very preliminary. It's very proof of concept kind of thing. And what I do want to describe to you is the process we went through getting a project going at our particular institution, and how the project started out as one thing and became another thing altogether. And mostly that was a process of serendipity. As Paul mentioned in the beginning, we both of our communities needed access to local historical information, and we had historical societies that couldn't do that on their own. So it started out as kind of a straight up digital collection of historical material that was local. And then certain little things happened, like the very first meeting we had in the lobby of our library, Paul mentioned, well, we're kind of interested in doing something with veterans. We already have these audio tapes. We'd like to maybe videotape, get some oral histories. And we were like, that's a real good idea. We'd probably never get around to doing that, but that's a really good idea. So, that was kind of one idea. Then a patron unloaded a bunch of old moldy newspapers from the 1930s on us, and we had to digitize those. So then we had that little thing over there, and we kind of had to learn how we were going to, I almost said an F-bomb, how we were going to, how we were going to do that. So then that kind of got a little digitization initiative, which I'm not going to say that phrase again, I'm going to say digi. So that's what we say in our library. We don't say, try to say digitization initiative 6 times in a half-hour meeting. And you're just going to say, do that. So if I say digi, that's what it is. So we're kind of starting a digi, we get a digi committee together. And then John shows up to me and says, we've got this group of library retirees, and they meet frequently, and there's all these photographs, and this is great institutional memory stuff. I'm like, yeah, that would be pretty cool. So then there's this other little seed, and you came up with a WordPress little website that I don't think we have to show.
No,
And
it
then
hasn't gotten
we were
that far.
talking about it, and I said, well, maybe we could teach them to do this themselves. We could train them how to do that. So this thing started happening where we started thinking about a collection that was a lot of different collections, and maybe it could be decentralized in some way, and that the library would facilitate and partner with individuals and maybe institutions like, oh, here comes Bill Clinton. Let's say one of the high schools, for instance. And we get this other thing. So we're coming to ILEAD, and it's all kind of coming together. And we don't think we are, but we're drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. And so before long, we come to realize that no one else at our library knows what we're doing at all, or what we're talking about, or what we're thinking. I think they're still thinking, oh, there'll be some pictures from the History Center that they're going to digitize and like make a little something somewhere. They'll put them somewhere, maybe somewhere. And so we're like, no, this is really getting big. This is something different we can do. Our library board wants us to partner with the community in creative ways. This is a way we could do that. And so I think over lunch I said to our library director, maybe we should really present something to the department heads about this. You guys know what the banana we're going to do. And they said, okay. And then we set a date, and then it didn't happen. And then we set a date, and it didn't happen. And I'm going into that frustrated zone again, aren't I? Sorry. I know it's up there, but whatever. So, after a lot of frustration, and realizing that, they were putting the budget together at the same time as all this is being put up, we presented to the department head, and I want to show you what we presented to them, because this was kind of the big part of it, was trying to come up with a pitch and a way to sell it to them. So we started out with like lots of cool dated buzzwords all in the front here, because every old buzzword comes back and it's new again. And, and David, I gave them your book before we did this, because I thought, they'll look at that and they'll see all your Dealey Bopper stuff and be really impressed, and then I'll kind of do like oversimplified Dealey Bopper stuff. And it worked.
Oh, good.
So I give you thanks for it, and don't do any copyright. So basically what I was saying to them is, this is our collection, and it's a library collection. It's, the model is, look at this cool stuff, please come, please use it, right? And then a lot of it already had digital content. Digital can mean a lot of things, but it's still kind of like items. Even if it's databases, we're selecting and procuring and then giving access to these different items. And then, so I put a little animation in there because it's after lunch, like now, and wake people up. So we can make this digital collection, whatever it is, and it would interact somehow, right? We don't know, it'll interact somehow, and it'll be cool. And don't hit the link, I'll tell you to go back to it. So then I really regret this slide because it came off as snarky. Alternately, using the same technology and a little ambition, we could get something like this. So using again an old buzzword environment, so we proposed that what we would have is we would actually create this large environment that smaller collections would be a part of. And could interact with our catalog, you get access that way. We could have, one of the things that we have is, local newspaper that the publisher doesn't want us putting it out there on the internet, so we could have collections where the access was limited. But then we can also create collections for other institutions in our neighborhood, if you will, in our Mr. Rogers neighborhood. Some of which they don't even have to share with anyone else. And to me that was like, the good part was that, hey, we're actually not going to provide access. That's something we're supposed to do, but it can just be for them. And then justifying blah, blah, blah. Because it was just selling stuff for them. And then just to give them an example of, we could have joint ventures where, like say with the high school, we could share time and money on a specific collection, like the digitizing the yearbooks. We could collaborate like we would be doing with our History Center, where it would be an ongoing collaboration. We would share equipment, training, they would kind of work on their own, we would communicate, and then we could just do out-and-out consulting where maybe mom, pa, retail store out there needs to digitize their invoices, and we can take our little portable scanner out there and plug it into their computer and help them with that, and we don't even have to see any of it. So we talked about, that we had a plan, we do a plan for a startup and all this, and how to get buy-in, hopefully get somebody maybe over at the mayor's office or somebody over there across the street at the municipal offices to buy into it. And so we gave, I guess it was about an hour, 45 minutes. And then we were done and they said, okay, sure. Like, okay. So, but what happened with that was that they weren't enthusiastic enough to put a budget line in the budget for us. So they said we could have per capita money. So right now we don't really have an actual thing. We have lots of plans. We have short and long-term strategy. We have like everything really kind of ready to go. But we just need money to get a level 1 license for Content DM, which is what we decided to go with. Going forward, so because of ILEAD, you want to interrupt?
Yeah, I want to say, why do you think we needed that level content jam instead of the regular one? Maybe the audience wants to know that.
Yeah, we didn't go, I mean, we could have we already had a presence on IDA, but I was worried that Alice didn't like me anymore. It was just awkward. I know. Come on, that's why it's a joke. But we really needed to be the administrator of this in order to make these little private collections and so forth work. So that's why. And we looked at a couple other products, but we went with Content DM because I had used it in earlier incarnations, and I thought that would help when it came time when we really got up and running, that someone would have to be training people, and I could be doing that. Maybe my learning curve wouldn't be so. And it's not perfect, but it's a known quantity. And also, they promised us that it could do everything that we wanted it to do. Did I cover everything? Pretty much? Okay, so go back, and then we'll actually show you what little we have to show you, just a little example. And this is using it's a Content DM, but it's their Quick Start, which is if you don't know about it, it's their free license. You can actually do kind of a lot with it. You can't customize it too much. But it all goes on their server, and it's nice. So we just put this together to kind of show the idea that there would be different collections, and they could be thematic. And then I think if you scroll up a little bit, John, then this was just to say, some things might be closed and library use only, that kind of thing. And if you just click on something randomly. So it looks like IDA because it's Content DM. And we just put in really bare metadata right now because it's just our proof of concept. So this is what we're showing to remind people that we're working on something. And that's it. And I didn't actually use too many dirty words, did I? If you ever, by the way, and Karen can confirm that it's actually okay to talk really dirty at our library. So that's part of the reason I haven't learned to filter myself. So I'm really dirty.
I need you to
Hello,
say
everyone.
banana at my new job. It's not so okay.
Yeah. Okay. Questions? What?
What do we learn?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes.
Gratitude is so 20th century. Come on. It's just passing. I actually did not include that as part of this, but you've all been thanked a bunch of times. Tiffany, however, has not been thanked, and we tend to go off and work on our own and get things done and not realize that no one knew that she'd email and then I was like, yeah, we're meeting Paul tomorrow. Don't worry about it. So she was really good with that. She didn't scold us at all. And yes, David.
So one of the things I think is interesting is phrase was library as a platform. And so we saw earlier in the day, we saw the idea that building apps, and you give us an XML feed, you give us RSS, we can make you part of these community portals, these community apps. And so the library becomes a way of sort of passing through community information, a platform for the community to discuss. If I get this right, it's really kind of interesting, which is digitization as a platform. In other words, you're a school, you want to keep something, but only within that library or only within your school, but we have this capability, and so we become a service, which is a slight shift from the idea that we digitize our stuff for our mission. And we thought, though, one of the things I thought was interesting is we've always looked at licensing as, how horrible it is to keep it only within the physical library or only, to restrict access. It's a necessary evil. But what I understand you're saying is, no, it's actually part of the service. If we become a platform, the idea that we can keep it just for your school, we're serving our mission, which is building and supporting the community. Its access has a different sense here than what the general grand public access is. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and it just comes from we all know that there's certain things in our profession that we think are great. Access, come on, people. But, other people maybe not, that's not what they want. One time I was on the reference desk with with Roberta Johnson, who's our assistant director. And she was telling people, you know, you get a computer, you know, you can get on, but you should really get a library card and do this and that. And they were standing there like this and this, and I said, Roberta, they don't want a library card. They don't. They're never going to get one. They want to come in and use the computer every day. That's what they want, so why don't we just give them what they want? So I don't see why we can't just give people what they want. And if they want our help, we can give them help, and we don't have to ask in return that we be allowed to broadcast it to the world if they don't want it that way. If they do, that's great. Obviously, that's, you know, we go there first.
But sometimes
if they don't, it's a service.
Sometimes participation requires borders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
What I like about this thing is that it's a combination of things. It's that potential to create community and all that stuff that you're talking about. But we eventually will want to get our digitized, just the traditional stuff, getting all that film that we have, really old film. My story is people coming in saying, well, there was an orphanage in town, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah, fine, and I want to do some research on it. So where's all this stuff about this orphanage? I go, they wanted to look at film, in newspaper film. I go, well then do you know what years? Do you know where you want to go? Because all it is film going back to way back when. And I thought, well man, if we digitize this, we could at least have them go maybe year by year and do, you know, control find and find something, you know. So, so there's some traditional stuff that this whole project is sort of a mix, you know, hodgepodge, but a useful hodgepodge.
You said, kind of like Paul said, that these had diverged at one point and then we're going to come back together. Where's the come back together?
I think that's, hopefully that's a short-term goal. Right now, I mean, Paul is, and you know, Paul's too modest to go on and on about it, but you know, he's part-time in youth services. So you can imagine any of you who have worked part-time or had part-timers at your library, he's on the desk all the time, or he's doing programming, and he's chugging along. We're waiting for our money. So that's our first thing right now, is we need our money, we need to start. And then once we start, I think it'll be easy enough for us to merge our projects in some way. What I, you know, in my megalomaniacal fantasies about what would happen is that, you know, our library would start this environment, and then maybe the Niles Public Library would start their environment, and then you get organs forming, and then you got a whole organism. And but who knows? It might just be a link to start with.
I can address part of that. The resources I had to work with, it was obvious that the first story that could be told reasonably well was the library's own history. And I intend to use that. It's like you were talking about, get a grant so you can get the next grant and you can, you know, step up. I think now that we are telling the library's story in a compelling way and the community sees us doing that, sharing it with them, I'd like then to get more tangible support for telling the entire community's story, and then partnering pretty aggressively with the Niles Historical Society and so forth.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're doing really well, so let's take 15 minutes for the inevitable effects of lunch, and we'll meet back here at 2:15.